Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the Town of Pelham. Everyone present will be given an opportunity to comment on the applications being heard. Please address your comments and questions through the chair. This public meeting has been called to satisfy the requirements of the Planning Act and Council bylaws. Notice of this meeting has been given by prepaid first-class mail to all persons listed as owners in the last revised assessment roll within 60 meters, 200 feet of the subject properties. In addition, a public notice sign has been posted on the lands. Agencies commenting on the applications may request that certain conditions be imposed, should an application be approved. Voicing objections to these conditions will not adversely affect the committee's decision. The purpose of the application and relative correspondence will be heard, following which the applicant will be given an opportunity to address the application. Any person concerned with the application will then be given an opportunity to speak. Please state your name and mailing address for the record. At the conclusion of the discussion, the committee will render a decision and advise of any applicable conditions. Specific wording for conditions will be determined by the committee following the public portion of this hearing. All interested parties are invited to be present. Copies of the decisions will be mailed to the applicant or agent and to any other person who files a written request. There are colored forms for this purpose, which are available on the back table. Any person or corporation or public body has the right to appeal either the decision itself or the conditions of the consent to the local appeal body within 20 days of the decision for minor variances and within 20 days of the mailing of the decision for consent applications. The panel tonight includes, to my far left, Mr. Bernie Law, to my immediate left, Bill Sheldon. I am Don Cook. I am the chairman for this evening. Next, beside me to my immediate right is Holly Wilford, Deputy Clerk and also the Secretary for the Committee of Adjustment for this evening's meeting. Sitting at the podium is our clerk, Nancy Bizzato, and who is also chairman, I'm forgetting the words. Not chairman, but Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment. And the table to the side is Mr. Derek Young, who's from our engineering department, and Mr. Curtis Thompson from our planning department. Does any member of this panel have any pecuniary interest in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act or on any of the applications being considered at this hearing? If so?
I do not, Chair.
I have none.
And I have none either, Madam Secretary. Holly, have there been any requests for withdrawal or adjournment?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, there have not.
For tonight, we're going to call the first application is A 2020-415 Canberra Road. Holly, would you please summarize the report from the Planning Committee? The Planning Department, sorry.
Committee of Adjustment hearing Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020, 4 p.m. Please note, no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. This presentation is based upon the Town of Pelham's Planning Department report and analysis. All comments received from commenting agencies and the public have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members for their consideration. Decorum. The Committee of Adjustment is a formal public hearing requiring decorum, meaning all comments are to be made through the chair. Please wait to speak at the public portion of the meeting and only speak while at the podium. Disrespectful comments will not be tolerated. Cheering, booing, or hissing from the gallery will not be tolerated. Please note, if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons will be asked to leave. Application for minor variance, file A8/2020P 415 Canberra Road. Excerpts from Planning Report. The subject land is located on the north side of Canberra Road, lying west of Effingham Street, known municipally as 415 Canberra Road in the town of Pelham. The minor variance application requests a relief from Section 7.7A, max accessory lot coverage, seeking 2%, whereas 1% is permitted. Section 7.7D, max accessory building height, seeking 4.22 meters, whereas 3.7 meters is permitted. To date, the following comments have been received. Niagara Region Planning and Development, no comments. Building Department, a building permit will be required. Public Works Department, no comments. Public, no comments. Is the variance minor in nature? The variance to increase accessory building lot coverage to 2% is minor overall, as adequate land area remains available to handle stormwater runoff, the septic system, and preserve a rear yard amenity area. Increasing the accessory building height to 4.22 meters is minor given the rural context. No negative impacts are anticipated by the adjacent neighbors, as over 60 meters separates the nearest residential neighbor. Is the variance desirable for the development or use of the land? Increasing the accessory building lot coverage is desirable for the land because it will allow for enhanced use of the rural residential property, which is relatively small in size and constrained for an agricultural area or traditional farming operation. The variance request to increase the accessory building height is desirable for the property as it allows for enhanced storage and use of the facility. The adjacent dwellings are set back over 60 meters and are buffered. No adverse impacts are anticipated on the surrounding lands. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? The proposed use of the building accessory to a single detached house is permitted in the specialty agricultural designation of the official plan, and the policy does permit uses which are compatible with agriculture. Given the proposed location of the accessory building, the requested increase in building height will not compromise the objectives of the official plan, particularly with respect to the use compatibility, stormwater runoff, and private sewage system servicing capabilities. The request to increase the accessory building lot coverage directly impacts the development's horizontal footprint upon the lands. The variants are appropriate given the site's rural context and meets the general intent of the town's official plan policies. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? The size of the proposed accessory building's height to 4.22 meters and increased lot coverage to 2% is appropriate given the rural context. Reasonable amounts of open space remain available on site for the amenity area, stormwater runoff, and sewage system purposes. Thus, the increased height and lot coverage will not adversely impact the rural character of the area or surrounding countryside. The variance maintains the intent of the zoning bylaw. Planning staff is of the opinion that the application has satisfied the Planning Act, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and conforms to the provincial, regional, and local plans. The proposal is compatible with adjacent uses and the rural agricultural character of the area. Planning staff recommend that application A8/2020 be granted. The following conditions are suggested. None.
Thank you, Holly. One of the things the chairman forgot, he forgot to invite the applicant or a representative to come up and please if you are here, please come up and have a chair at the table. And if you wouldn't mind, by pushing the button, which I just turned off, by pushing the button, you will be recorded. So please state your name and your address.
Michael Pastel, 415 Canberra Road.
Thank you very much. Do you have any comments you wish to add to the what's just been told to us?
I do not.
Does anyone in the audience wish to make any comments with regard to the application in front of us at the moment? All right. Any members of the committee wish to ask Mr. Pesto or members of our staff any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I see there's no condition regarding sanitary connects. Well, sanitary or septic tank.
And
Through you, Mr. Chair, the application would have been circulated to the region. Let me just double check the circulation, but they did not offer any objection. They further didn't request any conditions, so they must have been satisfied with the property and as it is situated.
Mr. Pastor, you're not planning on having any type of water service or in the garage?
I am not.
Does that help you, Mr. Shaw?
Oh, it was just an observation more than anything that in many cases of applications like this that come before the committee, there is a condition usually that refers to connection of sanitary water and whatnot being disallowed. And I was a little surprised not to see it, that's all.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did receive correspondence from the region indicating that they had no concerns and in fact did not require the fees for this one. So they did review the application but had no concerns.
Move the application, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Can I have a seconder?
Yes, sir. I second that application. Consent.
Mr. Chairman, move the application be granted. The following reasons: the variance is minor in nature, adequate land area remains for stormwater, septic, and amenity area given the rural context. Intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained. Intent of the official plan is maintained. Proposal is desirable for the land as it will enhance the use and usage of storage on the property. The application is granted without prejudice to any other application in the town of Pelham. Committee of Adjustment considers the written and oral comments and agrees with the minor variance report analysis and recommendations that this application meets the Planning Act tests for minor variance. There are no conditions, Mr. Chairman.
All in favor of granting the application? All in favor of granting the application? Carried. The next application is a minor variance application A10-220, 6672 Summersides Boulevard, the town of Pelham, block 43, 59M, 471. Representative from the owner, Ken Gon. Mr. Gonu, please have a chair at the table. Ms. Wilford, please read us the synopsis of the planning report of this application. Sure.
Certainly. Committee of Adjustment hearing. Please note no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. This presentation is based upon the Town of Pelham's Planning Department report and analysis. All comments were received from commenting agencies and the public have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members for their consideration. Excerpts from Planning Report. The subject land is located on the southwest corner of Summersides Boulevard and Kaler Avenue, known municipally as 66 to 72 Summersides Boulevard in the town of Pelham. The minor variance application requests relief from Bylaw number 4041, 2018, Section 2, RM1-287, Section 6, General Provisions C, Garage Setback, to remove the shared masonry wall requirement in favor of an approved Ontario Building Code detail. Bylaw number 4041, 2018, Section 2, RM1-287, Section 6, General Provisions C, Garage Setbacks, seeking a minimum interior side yard setback of 1.2 meters on the other side, whereas 2.4 meters is required. Section 6.1D, maximum accessory lot coverage, seeking 13% for 68 and 70 Summersides Boulevard, whereas 10% is required. To date, the following comments have been received. Building Department. Mutual garages must have an alternative firewall as per the Ontario Building Code. Individual building permits are required for each townhouse unit and detached garage. Public Works Department. The master grading plan for the River Estates Phase 2 subdivision illustrates Block 43 subject lands, draining north to south towards Tokler Lane, reducing the minimum interior side yard setback for the garages, effectively having the lands available to drain storm water for units 68 and 70 southward. This can lead to rear yard flooding during heavy storm events and cause water accumulation against the detached garage walls. The water is only draining off the subject lands by sheet flow. Does not support the minimum interior side yard setback request. No public comments. Is the variance minor in nature? The request to remove the shared masonry wall provisions is reasonable and minor overall, as the Ontario Building Code best regulates these matters. Increasing the maximum accessory lot coverage to 13% is minor overall, as adequate land area remains available for rear yard amenity space. Adequate landscaped open space is also available for stormwater management purposes. However, notwithstanding the requested minor variance to reduce the interior side yard setback to 1.2 meters for detached garage, these lands have been designed to sheet flow southbound towards Tokler Lane into the storm sewer system. Town engineering staff are concerned that a concentrated drainage caused by extending garage walls interfering with the sheet flow may cause rear yard flooding. Is the variance desirable for the development or use of the land? The request to remove the shared masonry wall provisions is desirable for the land because it's already regulated by the Ontario Building Code, and it will allow more construction design flexibility for the builder/market. Increasing the maximum accessory lot coverage to 13% is desirable for the land, as it will allow the construction of double-car garages for each townhouse unit without eliminating the desirable rear yard amenity space. However, reducing the interior side yard setback to 1.2 meters for the detached garage may negatively impact the overland drainage of the subject lands through rear yard flooding caused by the proposed wall extension, which narrowly concentrates sheet flow. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the official plan? Removing the shared masonry wall provisions maintains the general policy intent of the official plan because wall construction details are regulated by the Ontario Building Code, and there are no obvious negative impacts anticipated with its removal. Increasing the maximum accessory lot coverage maintains the general policy intent of the official plan because access continues to provide via the rear laneway, adequate amenity space remains, and the increased lot coverage proposed by itself will not adversely impact the drainage capabilities of the subject land. However, the request to reduce the interior side yard setbacks were not accompanied by a thoroughly demonstrated need on the basis that the subject zoning provision isn't warranted, causes undue hardship, or is otherwise impossible to comply with Policy E1.5. The planning justification brief spoke to the 4 tests of the Planning Act, but nothing else. The answer for question 5 of the minor variance application states the reason it's not possible to comply with the zoning provisions is to provide rear lane townhouses while accommodating parking and adequate spacing. Town staff note that the subject lands are large enough to accommodate up to 4 double-car garages, although in a different configuration, employing jogged or angled interior lot lines. No interior lot lines exist on Block 43. Any future lot lines will be bound by the RM1-287 zoning provisions. Together with the drainage concerns, town staff aren't convinced that the zoning request satisfies the test for meeting the official plan policy intent. Does the variance maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? Removing the shared masonry wall provisions does not compromise the ability to comply with the Ontario Building Code because there are several acceptable wall construction details available to the builder under the code, and the zoning bylaw still continues to allow for mutual detached garages as was originally intended. Increasing the maximum accessory lot coverage maintains the general intent of the zoning bylaw because ample parking stalls are provided off the rear laneway, adequate amenity space remains, and the increased lot coverage proposed by itself will not adversely impact the drainage capabilities of the subject lands. The intent of the 2.4 meter interior side yard setback for the detached garage is actually to allow for a parking stall beside the detached garage structures. It originated beyond the consideration of the stormwater drainage and can be evident from the default side and rear yard setbacks of the zoning bylaws general provisions for accessory buildings. Therefore, planning staff are of the opinion this request does maintain the intent and purpose of the site-specific zoning bylaw. Planning staff is of the opinion the proposal applies current planning and development principles dealing with appropriate greenfield development, making efficient use of the designated urban area lands, providing design flexibility where suitable to do so, with one exception. The proposed minor variance should not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood with regards to land use incompatibility, traffic, privacy, and stormwater runoff. Planning staff is of the opinion, with one exception, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the provincial, regional, and local plans. Given this analysis, planning staff recommend that minor variance file A10/2020 be decided as follows. Bylaw number 4041, 2018, Section 2, RM1-287, Section 6, General Provisions. C. Garage setbacks to remove the shared masonry wall requirement in favor of an approved Ontario Building Code detail. Approved. Garage setbacks, minimum interior side yard setback of 1.2 meters on the other side, refused. Bylaw number 1136, 1987, Section 6.1D, maximum accessory lot coverage, 13% for 68 and 70 Summersides Boulevard, approved. The following conditions are suggested: that the applicant, to the satisfaction of the chief building official, provide mutual garages which have an alternative firewall as per the Ontario Building Code, and individual building permits are required for each townhouse unit and detached garage prior to construction commencing.
Thank you, Holly. Mr. Gagne, do you have any thing you wish to add to this?
Yes, I have a PowerPoint I'd like to show and demonstrate a few things and explain a few things, and I think she's setting that up right now. I'll just move over there. Okay, these are the variances they've been explained in depth. The removal of the masonry wall, there's...
Ken,
I'm sorry.
would you mind pushing the button there on the microphone, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
There
we go. Okay, these are the variants that were requested, and they've been explained thoroughly. The removal of the masonry wall. There's many building code options for the design and construction of those walls. They must be reviewed by the chief building official and approved by the chief building official before permits are issued. So there's alternatives for the type of wall. So that variance seems very reasonable and practical. I'll skip to number 3, the increased accessory building coverage from 10% to 13%. That's all been explained, and staff are in support of that as well. So the only variance that we have a little bit of dispute about is the reduction of the side yard setback from garages from 5 meters in between the garages to 2.4 meters. The reduction of the interior, we'll just focus on variance number 2. The reduction of the interior setback to 1.2 meters is to provide adequate rear yard access and parking for future residents and to accommodate rear yard drainage as per the Upper Canada report and the grading plans that were provided with the application. This is the siting of Mountain View Homes has purchased all of these blocks along Summersides Boulevard. They back onto Tokar Lane. The one that we're applying for a variance here is outlined in red. The whole purpose of these variances is specifically for us to do our best to provide as much parking for these units as we can, because there's very little to no parking going to be provided on Summersides Boulevard. So all of the access to these units are designed from Tokar Lane as per the town's secondary plan design, and a number of demonstration plans which the town has produced. They'd like to see this along Summersides Boulevard so there's no cars parked all along the street. There won't be any driveways in the front yards. All the cars and parking related to these units will be in the backyards off of Tow Car Lane. So what we tried to do is provide as much parking as possible, so we've designed double car garages for each unit. And with double car garages for each unit, there's also a double car driveway, so there'll be 4 parking spaces per housing unit in the backyards off the laneway. This is a blow-up of the plan, where it shows the proposed townhousing in the top part of the drawing. The townhouse plans conform with all of the zoning requirements. There's no variances required for that at all. All these variances focus on the garages. So we show the increased coverage, we show the reduced setback, which is 1B there, and the removal of the masonry wall. This is another sort of blow-up of the same drawing. It's a technical drawing that shows the drainage design. And you can see the garages on the lower part of the drawing. The backyard drainage is collected by swales. Unit number, well, there's no unit shown there, but the unit on the right drains out towards Klager Avenue. The interior units are to drain between the 2 garages. And the left unit will drain towards the outside and down the side lot line. We've done a number of other houses in southern Ontario and in Niagara, hundreds of them to be exact, where we've had rear yard drainage that goes around the buildings. And the reason why that has to be done sometimes is the rear yards are often higher than the back of the house, so you've got to drain around the house towards the front. So here's an example on Buckley Terrace up in Lookout where that has been done and it works. And here's another one that has been done and building permit in accordance with the building permit, in accordance with the grading plan of the subdivision. Now, if we didn't have the side yard setback variance, we would have to separate them a little more, and that's what's shown on this drawing here, at 2.45 meters for each side. And what happens is then we have the center line of the units. If there's a fence, that would have a sort of an angled fence along the new lot line that will be produced there eventually. These are what the housing units are going to look like. Their design is contemporary. You can see there's no front yard garages or driveways or car parking. This is the rear yard look from the rear yard laneway. Really, nobody's going to see this except for the people that live there and use the driveway for access to their garage and or visitors. You can see on the drawing on the right, that is the space, the 2.4 meters that we're providing between the garages that would accept the drainage from the 2 internal lots that would go through between the garages out to the laneway. I had a discussion this afternoon with Mr. Derek Young of the Public Works Department, and we discussed different ways of maybe coming to a compromise or looking at different ways of constructing it. What we would like to offer as an alternative is, instead of 1.2 meters setback, we could go down to 1.5 meters. So that means there would be 3 meters between the 2 garages. And I prepared another drawing that looks something like this, which I believe you have in front of you. We would like to suggest that the backyard, where the backyard is, the fall from the closest part of the garage to the back of the house, the fall from the garage to the laneway is about an 8-inch drop. And that would be about a 3.3% grade. If that laneway between the garages is done with compacted gravel, which we are doing a lot between houses, and There's also, say, for instance, walkways installed there. We believe that 3 meters would probably be sufficient. I'd like to also point out that the letter from our Canada Consultants, which is this letter, I believe you have in front of you. They point out in their letter, Mr. Jason Schooley, who's a professional engineer, has designed these numerous times in the town of Pelham and southern Ontario, and he explains how the system works and would be sufficient for the drainage from those backyards. So I guess what I'm suggesting here is we'd appreciate the approval of the 2 variances recommended by staff, and perhaps you might ask Mr. Young what his thoughts are on the 3-meter setback as opposed to 5 meters.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. The first question I have is, I noticed in the planning report, the original planning report, Curtis, under item 4, variance general intent of the zoning bylaw, my copy reads, therefore, the planning staff, of the opinion of this request does not maintain the intent and purpose. And this was related to the 2.4 meter versus 1.2 meters setback between the units. What? And then when Holly read her, she missed the word not. So I'm asking, is the not supposed to be in the committee report, in the report, or not? Or did I miss something on the way through?
Through the chair. No, that was an error. I had provided the Deputy Secretary Treasurer with a memo, just updating that.
Must have lost it somewhere in the package of paper. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Young, Mr. Gagne's given us a couple of alternatives. Can I have are you sticking with your original position?
Through you, Mr. Chair. This came about more so not regarding the apron swells or the drainage. It is on. Sorry. This was more to do with the fact that only having a 1.2 setback between the lot line and the garage, should the owners of the property decide to put a walkway in, if they have 3 cars, one's going to park in front of the garage and they're going to have to walk somehow into the back garden. The only access that's shown on these lots was a door at the back of the garage. If you have 2 cars parked and then someone parks in front of that as they're offering 4 parking spaces, there has to be a means of access, which means they're going to put a walkway down the side of the garage. If you only have a 1.2 width gap, that's going to be filled with a walkway, which means the swale that they're intending to put between there is going to disappear. Both properties only have 1.2. That means you're going to have a 2.4 sidewalk with a fence down the middle. There's no room for that apron swale to operate efficiently to drain the properties. Hence why, it came up, and that was the reason for the refusal. Subsequent to that, Ken and I have spoken on this afternoon with various options on how we can make it work. The one he's proposing now with the 3 meter, that would allow a 1 meter walkway adjacent to the garage on both sides and still leave a 3 foot wide swale that could still drain the rear yards. So if that is proposed to go forward, then that would be acceptable.
It's proposing 1.5, not 3.
It's 1.5 on either side of the lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so currently, under the existing zoning bylaw, we would have between the 2 buildings, I make it being 2.4 times 2 sounds like 4.8 to me. Personally, I like the 2.4, so that would give 4.8 between the eaves of the 2 buildings. So we're talking building with
Actually,
walls.
the wall, yes.
Walls.
These are allowed to encroach a little bit over that.
Okay, so we're talking, this is going to be 4. What did I just say here? 4.8 meters between the 2 walls. My big fear is that the two neighbors are gonna put a fence down between them, and guess what? You're not gonna be able to walk between the fence and the building. Not only that, you've kind of limited your access to the amenity area from Tokar Lane. The second question I have, I did do some calculations myself. I did notice there's one elevation that I am somewhat concerned about. It's under the B in block 43. If I'm reading that right, it says 1.94 point, I guess it's 05. That's relatively high in comparison to the elevation in front of at the back of the garage at 193.15. That means the water's flowing toward the garage. And I didn't think that's what we were going to do. I thought we were going to try to get the water to go away from the garage and into the swale which you're building. My second part of that question is too, I did kind of a quick calculation along the curb line along Tokar Lane. It appears to me that curb is only has a slope from the westerly boundary to the catch basin at Klager of about 1.15%. The other thing I'm looking at, are you draining all the water from these properties to and over the curb, and you're relying on the curb gutter to actually provide the majority of the drainage? Is that what we're doing?
That's my understanding of how it works, yes.
So are we talking about barrier curb on Tokar Lane, or are we talking about roll curb?
It's a barrier curb with cuts for the driveways.
Okay. My next part of this whole thing is that one elevation that under the B, I looked at the other elevation, it's the other lot, the other two to the east. It seems to work, and I know I'm having a constructability issue with this. I think it's far too flat, and I don't know if anybody can actually construct and follow this grading plan that's going to make it work. It's a constructability issue that I have. I'm also very interested in your comment, you're going to use gravel between the two garages. That only works part-time because you're actually asking these people to maintain that, and I don't think that's appropriate. I think you have to come up with a better solution. From that point of view, the chairman cannot support the granting of the request to reduce the side yard setbacks. Now, are there any other comments from members of the committee?
Mr. Chairman, if I did, all right, let me ask a question. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Curtis. Did I read all this correctly, that the original idea was to have a single car garage with a surface parking slab beside it that would provide for this sheet drainage?
Through the chair, almost. It's not that it necessarily has to be a single car garage. It's just that the intent of that zoning provision was that knowing that these are likely to be mutual lot lines on one side or mutual wall garages, that at least on the other side, there would be enough space for a parking stall, whether it's a 1 car, 1.5, or double car, it wouldn't matter. Just that there would be a space for a parking stall. That's where it had come from. So that was the point of that comment, that it actually does meet the intent of the zoning bylaw.
But there would be no building on there.
Right.
Is that right?
Yep.
That was the original idea.
Yep. And that's evidenced because I had mentioned the original default section 6.1 provisions of the zoning bylaw, which are 1.2 meter side and rear yard setbacks, which basically just says the same thing. Like that was where it came from for this subdivision and for those rear lane garages.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the applicant. You own all the lots on Summerside?
Yes.
This isn't going to be the last time we see you.
No, there's more applications coming for all of them. This is sort of the test case, I see.
Yeah, I would suspect this is kind of the test case. Notwithstanding the chairman's comments, to the engineer, Mr. Young, this is a plan of subdivision. Fine grading is an art. It's not a science.
Through you, Mr. Chair. We have reviewed the grading. A couple of pointers through you, Mr. Chair. The elevation you picked up on there by the garage, I think that's a typo. We did spot that, but it was more we were looking at the side yard setback rather than the actual the fine tuning of the grading, shall we say. Just to clarify one other point, it's semi-mountable curbs that's going to be down Tokar Lane, not barrier curbs. So that we put semi-mountables in there to allow for the swells to drain onto Tokar so we could collect it.
So that's equivalent to a rollover.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct, yes.
If a fence is put down between let's assume for a minute, well, let me ask a technical question to the Secretary Treasurer. We have an application with dimensions. Is it with mutual agreement that these dimensions in the application can be altered? I.e., the applicant and Mr. Young have agreed on an amended dimension of 1.5 meters as opposed to what is being applied for in the application of 1.2. The change of dimension does not require a new application?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the dimension comes actually closer to the requirement of the bylaw, so recirculation is not required. If it were going the other way, from 1.2 meters to 1 meter, it would require recirculation. But 1.5 meters is actually closer to conformity with the bylaw.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the applicant, let's assume for a minute that a fence is put down the middle of that 1.3 meter area between the two garages. And a 1 meter walkway is put down. And that area is compacted gravel, which the purpose of which is to reduce the permeability and increase the runoff. Is that the?
It speeds up the runoff. And there's also the slope from the front of the garage towards Tokar Lane. So the slope is actually going down 8 inches. I'm not sure. Like, when I say front of the garage, then maybe I can point this up. This is what I'm talking as the front. So from here to here is an 8-inch drop. This would be all flat in between. And as a result, that's a 3.3% grade adjustment, grade drop. So that water is going to be flowing down there pretty good. There's some grades that are down to 1% in some developments.
No,
It's down to 1%. Sometimes there's a weeping tile that's installed to make it work a little better.
These garages are slab on grade, so there's your wall construction goes right to grade level, right?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, if the applicant could return to the microphone for the recording purposes. Thank you.
So we have a pretty good grade.
Your mic's not on.
My mic's on. We have a pretty good percentage grade running down there. I guess the question is, if a 100-year storm is now the 10-year storm, where are we in terms of runoff coefficients, and is this, through you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Young, if you've what factor do you use in terms of runoff coefficients? Do you use the 100-year storm still?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The 100-year storm was used to design the storm sewers. You can't design a swell to accommodate a 100-year storm. It would need to be a ditch rather than a swale. The swale is only there to convey the water to the road, which can accommodate the storm.
So when the swell gets overrun it floods.
It permeates into the ground is what they hope happens, yes.
Well, there's no permeation because he's got compacted gravel down.
Underneath the garages, yes, but not in the backyards.
I understand.
Backyards is a requirement for
But in
topsoil.
this area between the two garages, in the 1.5 meter, he's got compacted gravel.
The high point that's indicated on the apron swales is towards the center of the two blocks. So therefore, the area from where it hits the center to where it gets to the gravel, there should be sufficient grade along there to introduce some kind of runoff.
I know it's not within the purview of this committee, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. Are you concerned that this is a test case and the applicant and ourselves are going to get up close and personal many times on this issue?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the first one is always the tough one. And that's why we highlighted the issue with the 1.2 setback. We wanted to ensure that going forward, this wasn't becoming a repetitive issue. So we can deal with the issues now, and we're satisfactory with what's put forward. The following blocks should be standard. They should be straightforward. There should be less of an issue with them if we can finalize the fine details now. And that's what we're hoping to achieve with this. You know, the 1.2 is unacceptable. We need that swale that runs down between those sidewalks or walkways if they go in. We need to make sure that goes in now so that the future lots are all accounted for and we don't have to come back again and again and go through the same issues.
I'm inclined to agree with some of the engineering philosophy of the chair, but if a professional engineer on the town's payroll has agreed with the applicant, who is also a professional engineer, and we have not an independent third-party report, but we do have a third-party report from Upper Canada Consultants supporting the application, notwithstanding the chair's comments, I'm going to move acceptance of the application. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Mr. Law, do you have any comments you wish to make?
Yes, through the chair, Ken and Mr. Young, the stormwater drains, how far are the stormwater drains along Tokar from this part of the plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair. On Tokar Lane, there is only stormwater. The stormwater runs from the very western point of Tokar because it actually continues through. We're proposing to continue and link it to the adjacent development. So there is stormwater all the way along Tokar Lane.
Okay. So would it run into one of those ponds that we have back there?
It eventually ends up there. It currently goes to Clayger and then feeds north to Summersides and then discharges into the pond at Wellspring and Summersides.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public who wish to make comment on this application or the deliberations we're having? I see none. Are we ready to render a decision on this application, committee?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move approval of the application.
Each of all three variances, Mr.
Yes.
Sheldon, or
Yes.
do I have a seconder?
Yes, through the chair, I will second that motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'm moving the motion be granted for the following reasons.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, is the motion to grant at 1.5, not the...
1.5, yes, so
I
it's
just
the
need that into the
application
motion.
as amended.
Thank you, I just need that into the
To 1.5
motion.
meters.
Thank you.
I appreciate the input, Madam Secretary. Yes, I'll approve, the motion is to approve the three variances for the following reasons. Variance is minor in nature. The OBC best regulates these matters and adequate area remains for yard amenity. Open space for stormwater, purpose and intent of the zoning bylaws maintained. Intent of the official plan is maintained. The proposal is desirable for the land as that it allows the flexibility and allows double-car garages. This application is granted without prejudice to any other applications. No objections were received. The Committee of Adjustment considered the written and oral comments and agrees with the minor variance report analysis and recommendation that this application meets the Planning Act for minor variance. The above decision is subject to the following conditions. Garages must have alternate firewall. Building permits are required. Application for bylaw 4041 bracket 2018 section 2 point RM1 287 section 6 general provision, the garage setbacks, seeking a minimum interior side setback of 1.5 meters. For the following reasons, the variance is minor in nature and that's it. For that purpose and intent of the zoning bylaws maintained, intent of the official plan is maintained as the application demonstrated zoning provisions is warranted. Proposal is desirable for the appropriate development or use of the land as rear yard flooding is unlikely to occur. This application is approved without prejudice to any other application of the town of Pelham. The Committee of Adjustment considered the written and oral comments and disagrees with the minor variance report analysis regarding the interior side yard setbacks of the garages. And it meets the application for the Planning Act test of the minor variance.
All in favor? Oh,
Were there any conditions to be put to that?
I have no conditions.
the condition was that the garages have the alternate firewall. That would be under the first. Regarding the remove the sherry masonry wall. And of course, building permits are required for all structures. Okay. All in favor of the motion? We have it carried. I'll be voting against. The next matter in front of us is consent application B3 2020. Oh, thank you, Mr. Gagnon. Next application is consent application B3 2020P, 31 Emmett Street, Town of Pelham, Lot 56, part of Lot 55 on Plan 658. Is there a representative from the owner wishes to?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Please have a chair. State your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Michael Sullivan. I'm a planner for Sullivan Planning Services and agent for the owner.
Thank you, sir. Holly, would you please read us the excerpts from the planning report?
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, is this 31 Emmett Street?
This is Emmett Street.
No.
95
I think we're,
95
95 Pelham Street.
I think it's B6.
I was wondering who was on first.
Well, unfortunately, I got it wrong. I think I just read B6 rather than,
B6 is 1295 Pelham Street.
yes.
Yes.
We're good, thank you.
My mistake, Mr. Kaiser.
I thought I had a new consultant.
Committee of Adjustment hearing. Please note, no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. This presentation is based upon the Town of Pelham's Planning Department report and analysis. All comments received from commenting agencies and the public have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members for their consideration. Application for consent, file B6/2019P, 1295 Pelham Street. The subject parcel, shown as Part 2 on the attached sketch, has 30.34 meters frontage on the east side of Pelham Street, lying south of John Street, known municipally as 1295 Pelham Street in the town of Pelham. Application is made for consent to convey 1,479.8 meters square, Part 2, with an existing dwelling known legally as 1295 Pelham Street for continued residential use, together with an easement in perpetuity over 110 meters square, Part 3, for an existing sanitary sewer lateral connection in favor of Part 2. Parts 1 and 3 are to be retained for future single detached residential use totaling 749.9 meters square in lot area. Please note minor variance files A11/2018P was approved on August 14th, 2018, legalizing the proposed lot frontage of parts 1 and 3. To date, the following comments have been received. Building Department, no objections. Public Works Department, no objections. See conditions. Public, no comments. Planning staff are of the opinion the proposal applies current planning and development goals dealing with the appropriate infill development, making more efficient use of the existing urban lands where suitable to do so. The proposed severance should not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood with regards to traffic, privacy, and stormwater runoff. The subject lands will continue as a single detached residential use for the foreseeable future. In planning staff's opinion, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that consent file B6/2019P be granted subject to the following conditions. That the applicant submit a comprehensive overall lot grading and drainage plan for all parcels demonstrating that the drainage neither relies upon nor negatively impacts neighboring properties to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. Ensure Part 1 is serviced at Pelham Street with an individual 20 millimeter water service and 125 millimeter sanitary lateral service in accordance with town standards. Installation of any service will require a temporary Public Works permit to be obtained and approved by the Public Works Department. If existing services are proposed for reconnection, such service shall be inspected by the Public Works Department to determine their condition is satisfactory prior to connection. If the applicant shall bear all costs associated with these works. Ensure that the remnant land, Part 2, continue to be adequately serviced to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. Submit locate cards for both lots confirming no existing water or sanitary services branch from or through the proposed lots, save for the existing sanitary lateral on Part 3. Locate cards shall be required after the installation of new services. Obtain approval for a driveway entrance and culvert permit for the new lot issued through the Public Works Department to town standards. The applicant shall bear all costs associated with these works. Conduct an archaeological assessment and receive clearance from Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport. Remove the wall attached to the existing dwelling that encroaches upon parts 1 and 3 to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development. Sign the Town of Pelham Standard Memorandum of Understanding explaining that development charges and cash in lieu of the dedication of land for park purposes are required prior to the issuance of building permit. Provide the Secretary-Treasurer with registrable legal description of the subject parcel together with a copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for the use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. Provide the final certification fee of $395 payable to the Treasurer, Town of Pelham, be submitted to the Secretary-Treasurer. All costs associated with fulfilling conditions of the consent shall be borne by the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Do you have any, Mr. Sonny, anything you want to add to the planning report, or do you agree with the planning report is read into the record?
Mr. Chair, I do. I'm overall in support of the planning report. I've concerns about two of the conditions that are proposed.
And those would be, sir?
Okay, number 6, which is the archaeological assessment. My first note is that was not requested during pre-consultation. It was not noted at that point. And it's the property is mature in a mature residential area. And I think, and the lawn is manicured, so I think the opportunity for archaeological finds is minimal, in my view. And the second one is about the wall removal. I can understand the town's concern with removal of it, of a portion of it at least, the portion that would encroach beyond the part proposed. So I'm requesting the committee's consideration in removing only the portion of the wall that encroaches onto their lot rather than the whole thing as it seems to be written here, and for the waiving of an archaeological assessment. Thank you.
Hang on a second, I gotta get rid of the stupid phone, if I can. I'll sit on it. Okay, we'll take your request under consideration as when we deal with it. Mr. Thompson, there was one question about the archaeological. You wish to speak to that?
Through the
Assistance
chair.
on this?
Through the chair. The pre-con notes actually did, I'm looking at them right now, from November 2nd, 2017, did highlight an archaeological assessment, stage 1 and 2. And on the topic of the wall condition, the condition does read that removal of the wall attached to the existing dwelling that encroaches upon parts 1 and 3. So, I mean, it kind of says that only that part that's encroaching. So I don't know if it needs to be modified anymore. That's all we would have in mind.
I have a couple of questions. I'm running into a problem. Application is meant to consent to convey 1,479.8 meters, part 2. The conveyance is on part 2, so that makes part 1 the remnant. Am I correct on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe it is part 1 and 3. 3 would be where the easement is.
Yes. So the remnant then is parts 1 and 3. And that's fine. Because the way some of the conditions read, I think we got the remnants and the consent parcels mixed up. So I hope that when we deal this, we'll get that correct. Mr.
Sorry,
Young.
Mr. Chair, just to give you an update on this lot, the existing property actually drains out towards Stella Street. So it goes through the two parcels that were created, I believe, back in 2013 on Stella Street, which was severed off originally from this lot. And part 3 is where the current easement is, or the current sanitary lateral leaves the remnant parcel part 2 and drains down to Stella Street, which is one of the reasons why we need to ensure that easement goes in place.
Thank you, Mr. Young. I'm looking at the aerial photograph, and to the rear of the property that we're looking at 1295, it shows lots 50 and 52 on Stella Street. So I would think, looking at the way this drawing is, the sanitary lateral from this particular property, which is shown as part 2, does it follow the lot lines between 52 and 54?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure which the southernmost, the lot line on the southern side. Oh, sorry, 52. Yes, it follows the southern lot line of lot 52.
Okay.
Onto Stella Street.
Thank you for that. Members of the committee, you have any further comments? Do you have any comments you wish to ask? Are there any?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. Is the archaeological assessment clause becoming a standard clause issued by the planning department? It strikes me that this is a built-up area established for a good number of years. Is there a historical reason that one might expect arrowheads and other memorabilia out of this lot?
Mr. Thompson, you wish to make a comment?
Through the chair, it is becoming much more standard now. Provincial policies are and regional policies are requiring the preservation of any archaeological and cultural heritage resources. A number of years ago, the town conducted a heritage master plan, and a large component of that master plan was archaeological resources. So they had retained an archaeological consultant who prepared a number of schedules and composite mapping for the town. Usually areas that have high archaeological potential are along older roads, water courses, or areas where a previous site was. And the town has a pretty thorough coverage of high potential. Usually we'll waive or recommend waiving an archaeological condition if the building footprint, the new building footprint, is more or less in the same location of something that would have otherwise caused it to be disturbed. Or usually an area around 2 meters around the footprint of an existing building is typically considered disturbed. So yeah, that's basically where it comes from. It is becoming more of a consistent request.
Again, through you, Mr. Chairman, during the excavation period of establishing a new residence, assuming that this new residence is going to have a basement, would that excavation exercise satisfy the archaeological phase 1 and phase 2? And before you answer that, please explain the detailed difference or required between phase 1 and phase 2 of an archaeological study.
Mrs. Wiens, would you like to respond to Mr.
Mr. Chair, through you, a phase 1 archaeological study is a desktop review, basically reviewing historical mapping and information that exists based on what we know and other kind of available information that is in print form about the area. A stage 2 contains some limited test pits on the site where they would come in and do a test pit evaluation. And if they find anything out of the test pit evaluation, then they move to a stage 3 and a stage 4, which becomes much more involved. So stage 1, 2 archaeological assessment is a fairly simple and basic archaeological assessment. As Mr. Thompson mentioned, the town does have a cultural master plan that did map the areas that have archaeological potential, and this is in an area that has been mapped. And there is certainly existing information that we know about this area from early settlements, not just post-contact European contact, but also early Aboriginal and Indigenous settlements.
Then I can ask my original question: would the excavation of a footing, foundation, basement, would that constitute a test pit?
Mr. Chair, through you, though, a test pit is much shallower than that. It's usually a 3-meter wide test pit, a square, but it doesn't go down as deep as a full basement excavation.
So if you're going down deeper, would that constitute a test? Could it be construed as a test pit under the definitions of that we're operating under?
Mr. Chair, through you, it's not what constitutes a test pit. There are certain standards that archaeologists have to meet and comply with that are provincial standards for conducting archaeological assessments. That would not qualify for that. An alternative to undertaking a stage 1, 2 archaeological assessment is to have an archaeologist present on site during the excavation, and they can monitor. That tends to be more expensive than doing the test pit and the stage 1 and 2 archaeological assessment, because they tend to be there for the full day, and it's a much slower process in terms of the whole excavation process as well, because they have to be there to witness everything coming out of the ground.
How many test pits would be required on a lot this size?
Mr. Chair, it probably would only be 3 or 4.
3 or 4 3x3? Mm-hmm. 3 feet deep, 2 feet deep?
They usually go down about 18 inches.
8.5 feet. And an archaeologist must be present during the digging and observing of the test pits?
So in lieu of doing a stage 1-2 archaeological assessment, an alternative would be to have an archaeologist present during the excavation. During the stage 1-2 archaeological assessment, an archaeologist is not necessarily present. They will have field staff doing that work who are trained and do the screening of the area that are test pitted. But there could very well be an archaeologist on site as well.
You want to be shot or hung? Through you, Mr. Chairman, to the applicant. You've heard your choices.
There we go. Mr. Chair, I think in my experience, stage ones are almost always lead to stage twos. That's the I would have. As Ms. Weens was mentioning, stage one is strictly a desktop. Stage two is, I agree with everything she said in terms of what's required. In terms of dollars, it's probably $7,500 to $10,000 worth of effort. That's what my client will be concerned about. And I understand Mr. Thompson's perspective on that. And I think it would be, as Ms. Weens has said, it would probably be easier to go ahead. I'm asking for waiving. I don't think my client would like to have an archaeologist on site during excavation. So I'll leave it at that. I'll leave my request at waiving, and otherwise we'll go ahead with the committee's decision. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, based on the information received from the planning department, it would appear that this area is mapped, and there is a program in place. So when we come to the decision-making process on this application, I, for one, will not be in favor of waiving that clause.
Thank you, Mr. Sheldon. Members of the public, have any questions you want to ask regarding this application? You all know where it is. It's just around the corner, right across from Peddlers. No comments from the public. Any other comments from the members of the panel? Mr. Law?
Well, this is the type of, through you, the chair, this is the type of applications that we're looking for in the town of Pelham with land infilling, and it's going to have a good-sized lot when it's all completed. This land has been used this home was probably built about, I would say, 60 to 70 years ago. So this land has always been that of a side yard, gardens, baseball field, whatever the kids used it for. Therefore, I find that because it's been there this long and of a residential nature, that having a consent to build another home within the jurisdiction of our town makes sense to me. And as much as I totally agree with Bill, I find that I don't know whether it's worth the time and expense to go further with an archaeological survey. So personally, I would consent to this application.
Okay. Can I get a motion from the committee regarding application B6 2019 concerning conveyance of land at 1295 Pelham Street?
Yes.
Second?
So, Mr. Chair, the motion will be with the conditions, the conditions as stated?
For the conditions as stated. Basically, the motion is the consent application, B6 2019P, to convey Part 2 together with an easement and to convey an easement in perpetuity over Part 3 is granted, subject to the conditions as stated in the report. For the following reasons. that the application conforms to the policies of the Town of Pelham official plan, the regional policy plan, provincial policy statement, and the town zoning bylaw. This decision is rendered having regards to the provisions of 5124 and 5125 of the Planning Act. We, the Committee of Adjustment, have considered all written and oral submissions. Subject to the condition of provisional consent, this application meets the Planning Act criteria, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and complies with the growth plan, the Niagara Regional Official Plan, and the Town Official Plan. That being said, we're ready to take the vote? All in favor? Carried. You have your application to proceed. Sorry, the archaeological study stays. Now, the next application before us is file B3, 2020, being an application to convey Part 3 to be added to Part 2 on the sketch. It's 31 Emmett Street, the town of Pelham. Representative from the owner. Please have a chair, Mr. Kaiser. Name and address for the record. Thank you. No.
Okay. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Stephen Kaiser, and I'm the owner of Kaiser and Associates, the owner of the property at 31 Emmett Street.
Thank you. Ms. Wilford, will you please read the summary of the planning report?
Committee of Adjustment hearing. Please note, no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. This presentation is based upon the Town of Pelham's Planning Department report and analysis. All comments received from the commenting agencies and the public have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members for their consideration. Application for consent, file B3/2020P 31 Emmett Street. The subject land, Part 3 on sketch, has 1.524 meters of frontage on the north side of Emmett Street, lying west of Station Street, known locally as 31 Emmett Street in the town of Pelham. Merged with the abutting land, Part 2, for future residential use. Part 1 is being retained for a future residential use also. The existing dwelling and garage have now been removed. The application is to convey a boundary adjustment to equalize the lot frontage and lot areas of the two existing lots of record. To date, the following comments have been received. Building Department. A demolition permit was issued for the removal of the detached dwelling and accessory building. Public Works Department. No objections. See conditions. Public. No comments. Planning staff is of the opinion that the proposal applies current planning and development goals dealing with appropriate infill development, making more efficient use of the existing urban lands where suitable to do so. The proposed severance should not negatively impact the surrounding neighborhood with regards to traffic, privacy, and stormwater runoff. In planning staff's opinion, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statements and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that consent file B3/2020P be granted and subject to the following conditions. That the applicant merge Part 3 with Part 2 and obtain a written solicitor's undertaking to do so. Submit a comprehensive overall lot grading and drainage plan for all parcels demonstrating that the drainage neither relies upon nor negatively impacts neighboring properties to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. Ensure each lot is serviced with an individual 20 millimeter water service and 125 millimeter sanitary sewer lateral in accordance with town specifications. Installation of any missing services will require a temporary works permit to be obtained and approved by Public Works Department. If existing services are proposed for reconnection, such services shall be inspected by the Public Works Department to determine their condition is satisfactory prior to connection. The applicant shall bear all costs associated with these works. Submit a drawing indicating the location of the individual water services and sanitary laterals for all lots to confirm no existing service branches from or through any proposed lot lines to other lands and from or through the remnant parcel to other lands. Locate cards for all lots shall be required after the installation of new services. Obtain approval for a driveway entrance and culvert permit for each lot lacking street access or requiring modification issued through Public Works Department to town standards. The applicant shall bear all costs associated with these works. Sign the Town of Pelham Standard Memorandum of Understanding explaining the development charges and cash in lieu of the dedication of land for park purposes are required for one lot or both lots if no dwelling is rebuilt within 5 years of the issuance of the original demolition permit prior to the issuance of a building permit. Provide the Secretary-Treasurer with a registrable legal description of the subject parcel together with a copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for the use of the issuance of the certificate of consent. Provide the final certification fee of $395 payable to the Treasurer, Town of Pelham, be submitted to the Secretary-Treasurer. All costs associated with fulfilling conditions of consent shall be borne by the applicant.
Mr. Kaiser, do you have anything you wish to add for clarification, or you agree with the intent of the planning report?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I agree with the intended with the report and the conditions put forward by staff. Okay, we got it now. And the condition, you could just yell, Nancy. And the conditions by staff. If you've driven by the property, the house is now knocked down. It's a large lot, 100 feet of frontage by 160 feet deep. One would entertain the possibility of possibly a condo building on the property or townhouses to be built. But I thought we'd do something that was in flavor with the neighborhood and just keep the lot fabric more or less as is. So what the effort is here is to make two 50-foot lots. This was explained. Currently, one part is 55 feet, and the other part is 45 feet of an old plan of subdivision. So just wanted to equalize the frontage. It allows for a little bit better architecture in the homes that are designed to fit in with the neighborhood. I was reflecting back while I was sitting waiting through the other proceedings. I've been doing this for a long time. I purchased Mr. A.K. Wigg's house at number 6 Emmett Street in 1986. It was 120 feet wide, and we severed two lots, one on each side, and built the houses at number 4 and number 8 Emmett Street, and renovated Mr. Wigg's house. So that's 34 years ago I sat before this committee, and we're still doing it. But I look forward to the comments. Obviously, there's some neighbors here, and look forward to their comments. And that was the thought behind the application that you have here.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiser. Members of the public, do you have any comments regarding this application?
Absolutely.
Please come to the podium. State your name and address for the record. There's a little button on the microphone. If you push the button down, it's off. If it comes up, it'll be on.
It's on now.
Perfect. Thank you.
Before I start, I'm sure that you have received my letter. If it's all right, I'd also like to give you some pictures of our concerns. And I also like to give you the letter. I would also like to give you a letter, if you have not received it, from Jason Marr, the Director of Public Works, on this issue, if you have received that.
Okay.
You.
Okay.
Excuse me, I forgot to push the button. Please proceed.
Okay, this is a missive from Carol Jones and myself. We're residents of 44 Emmett Avenue for the past 43 years. Considering the town's financial situation, we are not opposed to allowing double-sized lots to be subdivided and additional single-family homes to be built on Emmett Street or Allen. However, we feel it is our duty to warn you about the increased homes to be built prior to installing storm sewers, which are called laterals. This will undoubtedly create a serious and ongoing problems for residents on the bottom of the street. This, we believe, is putting the cart in front of the horse, as they say. This letter is a history on the problems created by lack of actions on proper infrastructures in our area. Throughout our lives on Emmett Street, many town councils have acknowledged the need for major improvement to infrastructure on our street. Many proposals to improve our community by town planners, CAOs, and other departments have been made but never implemented. Several projects ranging from the building properties or building proper roads, storm sewers, laterals, curbs, and new trees have been ignored. Some were even passed by town councils only to have the plans diverted. According to my source, the exact lateral project that is essential has been diverted to 2020. 24, I should say. Our knowledge from this problem comes not only from our observation living at the same address, but also from our neighbors and attending the January Committee of Adjustment meeting concerning the Allen Street application. It is clear the lack of maintaining a prolific flow can be disastrous. Without laterals, water cannot flow efficiently due to branches, leaves, garbage, and debris and other obstacles obstructing its path. The existing culverts are incapable of handling the amount of water flow from new builds. The most efficient way to collect overflow is at the source or as close as possible. That is why laterals must be installed and are the most efficient alternative to simple ditches. When we first moved to the lovely street of Emmett, our 3-bedroom bungalow had ditches on 3 sides, which took away most of the watershed. All these waterways provided enough to control our watershed and eliminate flooding problems. Since that time, many changes have occurred. Along with other residents, since that time, many changes have occurred, along with other residents who are very concerned about our safety. Number 1, the CN railroad tracks were removed. And that was in the 80s. Our community green space and existing Steve Bauer Trail was lost and replaced by 6 new homes. That is when the larger CN ditch, which was beside our home, was filled. As that land settled, new problems were created. During heavy rains, storms began to pond and overflows over driveways and into garages. At this time, ditches are not properly maintained by the town, which has become a major problem. Even the major connection at Station Street ditch has been ignored on many different occasions when it was reported. And I think that the pictures show them, the last ones. They are also forced to, We have personally witnessed our south neighbors' backyards completely flood. They were forced frantically to unblock the ditch, which should have been the town's responsibility to allow the water to flow again. Number 3, in order to divert flooding plains away from the town homes built on the old Fawn Hill Public School property, the town installed curbs and drains, laterals, which redirected the water under Pelham Street and directed into the north ditch. This solved the flooding problems for the townhouses but created new ones for the residents. During rainstorms, the flow of water entering our ditches is so powerful it becomes danger to children and adults if they happen to slip off the sidewalk and fall in the ditch. And that's at the top of the hill. This ranging water flow also causes it to spill out of the ditch and onto the road and into the driveways, which continually wreaks havoc in our neighborhood. Now, due to this increased saturation, 34 Emmett had a water spring develop under their front porch and continued to run nonstop down the street for more than a week until the town's worker finally came to rectify the situation. Also, due to the increase, the sump pump at 40 Emmett ran continually for days until it finally broke down for overuse. This caused a major flooding for their basement, and it cost them over $3,000 to put in a prop or a new sub pump in there that would be able to contain or push the water. Due to watershed, 42 Emmett had severe ground floor flooding on 2 different occasions. We witnessed the water seeping into the house under the front door. The amount of damaged items and drywall spread out on their lawn was alarming. In fact, the latest flood was the reason why the lower level was not finished before the new owners bought the home. We would have told him that if he had come prior to buying the place to make an illegal duplex. 46 Emmett garage has had water seeping inside on many major rainstorms. Now that Allen Street application has been deferred by the members of the committee, along with application to build additional homes on Emmett, we are more concerned than ever. As the effect of global warming will continue to create more extreme weather conditions, such as longer and heavier rainstorms during all seasons of the year, we urge you to take action and have these laterals installed immediately. Common sense tells us not to put the cart before the horse. So please do due diligence and build the new infrastructure before additional development, as you would have in any new subdivision. Doing that would eliminate the risk of legal repercussions for property damage or personal harm caused by your inactions. This was respectfully submitted by Carol and Mike Jones. And now you have got the letter from Mr. Jason Marr. It validates our claims about the excess watershed on Emmett Avenue. It forecasts that it will take up to 2025 to eliminate our current dilemma with no increased bills. So please, don't be back asswards. Sorry, I seem to have put the cart before the horse. I should have said, don't be ass backwards. In my opinion, the Committee of Adjustment sanctions, if the Committee of Adjustment sanctions any more development, it will be aiding and abetting more dangers to homes and dangerous personal situations. You have the authority to stop these developments. If you neglect building proper infrastructures first, these projects will open a path for numerous legal and financial repercussions for the town of Pelham that all taxpayers will be ultimately paying.
Thank you very much for your presentation and reading into the record the letter from Mr. Jones. Mr. Young, we all are aware of the drainage problems we have on College and Emmett and those streets in that particular neighborhood. It would appear from Mr. Marr's note to these people that something is in the works, and hopefully town council will follow Mr. Marr's direction and Emmett Street will be rebuilt with proper storm sewers. Is that my understanding, Mr. Young? Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair. It is. This year we're proposing to reconstruct Pelham Street from College down to Port Robinson. There is a storm outlet at Port Robinson that hasn't been utilised yet, and that's why we're doing that now. So a lot of the runoff that will be coming down from Elizabeth and Allen Crescent will be diverted down to Port Robinson Road and not down Emmett. The current outlet that's going down to Emmett will be blocked off, So all the runoff from there will be directed to Port Robinson Road. The sewers on Port Robinson Road were constructed to accommodate this. They're just, with the reconstruction being delayed, like Emmett Street has, it's now forecast to be constructed this year, which is in Mr. Jason Maher's letter to you. He said it's due to be done 2020. The reconstruction of Emmett Street, however, has been put off to 23, 24 to ensure that the Pelham Street stuff gets completed first.
So it sounds like the town is definitely working toward. Now, this particular matter that we're dealing with this evening is really a conveyance of land for two existing lots. Basically, it's my understanding to make the lots more or less the same width. The other thing I've noticed too, in the conditions, there is a requirement that an overall drainage area plan be submitted as a condition. And there's only one thing I would like to add to that condition, is that the drainage plan also, hang on a second here, submit a comprehensive overall lot drainage and drainage plan for all parcels, and I wish to add the following word, including existing side yards of adjacent properties, so that we at least know how the adjacent properties, where the water is coming from them, whether it's actually flowing into or onto the lands under consideration at the present time. It's not much of an inconvenience, Mr. Kaiser. It means a few more shots just inside the property lines to the east and west of the two lots that you're looking at. So that was one thing I would like the condition to be added with regard to drainage. Are there any questions from the members of the panel on this application?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, the essence of this application, as I understand it, is a boundary lot adjustment, i.e., there's already two lots there. Everything meets the existing zoning bylaw. Two houses can be built tomorrow, am I correct? Mr. Curtis?
Kaiser.
No, I'm going to talk to
Curtis? Okay.
Mr. Thompson.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct. It's been confirmed by outside the town's external solicitor, and the client's lawyer, I believe, also checked title, and they're two legal conveyable or saleable parcels of land as they exist today. This consent is just to equalize the lot frontages and lot areas.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Jones. All the applicant's doing is trying to adjust a lot line. There's no rezonings, there's no variances, there's nothing. The applicant can come into the town hall tomorrow without this application being approved and apply for building permits for two houses on those two lots. So our action, whether it's to approve or deny this application, really has no bearing on the development of those two lots. We're not in a position to delay, stop, or have control over what might happen tomorrow if a building permit was applied for.
May I say a point? First of all, to Derek, I don't see anything in his proposal that says that the water is going to be diverted from and unless I've missed it, on 2020, where it said it was going to be diverted off abandonment.
Mr. Young.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The second paragraph down, it says, in 2020, we are completing the reconstruction of Pelham Street between College and Port Robinson's, which includes storm sewer improvements on Pelham Street. This project will help to intercept the storm flows from Pelham Street and watershed to the west of Pelham Street and will alleviate the flooding issues on Emmett. That clearly states that we are taking all the water that's coming down from Elizabeth, diverting it to Port Robinson Road.
Well,
Where's it going?
where's
Where's it going?
To Port Robinson Road.
Yeah, but how's it coming down at Elizabeth and not coming down?
Ms. Pupo, please address your comments through the chair, and I'll direct your comment for an answer. Now, and if you have a comment, would you please come to the podium?
I do want to come to the point.
You can.
Okay.
Please do.
And I would just like to say that when I sent this letter out, it was with the understanding that the Allen Street wasn't decided. I was out of town and I just got back in, and I had heard, I haven't even read what has happened, but I had heard that it had. So that was in injunction with that.
Okay. The Allen Crescent conveyance was turned down by this committee.
Yes, and I'm telling you that my letter was sent prior to that.
But your concerns regarding the drainage are very important to us. But what I'm also saying is our business tonight is really related to a boundary adjustment. And it would also appear that the drainage problem is being looked at. We know that I walk Emmett Street all the time, okay? I realize the ditches are in a terrible state. The existing driveway culverts also are in a terrible state. The outlet at Station Street, the bottom of Emmett Street, especially the ditch on the north side, it's not a good situation, but it would appear that the town have recognized this, and by Mr. Young's comments, there may be work that'll help alleviate the flooding that is occurring currently on Emmett Street. But that's beyond the decision of this committee. That is a decision of council. Council has made a decision to allow money, I hope, for the year 2020 to undertake some drainage improvements. The reason we're imposing the condition of lot grading for the two lots that are being created is to ensure that stormwater generated on the lots are going to be retained on the lots and will not create additional problems with the drainage on or into the ditches on Emmett Avenue. So that's the reason for that particular condition. Mr. Young will be reviewing the lot grading plan very closely, as he does with all the lot grading plans that come in on subdivision lots or individual lots. And we have faith in his work that he will make Mr. Kaiser toe the line on this one. So with that being said, I hope I've helped you. Ms. Pupo, do you wish to take the podium?
Oh, yes, I do. I have no objection at all of having two houses created on that lot. What I have objection is to how it's been managed by this town and how dirt was thrown into my ditches at the front of my house by the people that he used at the house to do his stuff. And I just suffered a $40,000 damage to my basement because of the ditches. So it's a serious issue. The ditches are a serious issue. And when I went outside and I talked to the contractors that were hired by him, they said, well, we were just hired to do this. That's not acceptable. I just suffered $40,000 worth of damage in my basement. It's not acceptable. So if no one's going to manage this project going forward and I have to suffer more consequences because of it, that's the issue. I don't have any objection to him building two houses on that lot. I have none. I have no objections. I'm just saying that it has to be done clean. And I know, I worked at the town, as you know, everyone knows, in 2013, Emmett Street was forecasted to be finished, to be reconstructed. And I'm sure there's information in the Public Works Department or the Engineering Department that has already the engineering for that, because it was put in for 2013, and then it was taken out for the East Fonthill lands. So then it was taken out for the East Fonthill lands, and now we were told by Jason Mars, it's in the 2024 budget. But if you go online and you look up all the budgets, it's nowhere in there. It's not even in there.
Okay. First of all, could you have Mr. Green, your contractor, have a look at the ditch in front of the properties where the house is taken down?
Respond to that, Mr.
Yes, sir.
We could. Thanks to Mrs. Pupo's comment. I was notified by the workers right away. Apparently, she came up to the house and said there was mud on the road. Public Works was called. The guys went. A little bit of mud fell off the tracks. I wasn't there, but I did come after the fact. I didn't see any mud on the road.
Because he threw it in my ditches.
But they came off the tracks of the excavator. The company came and made it good, as far as I was told. The same company, Greenfield Contracting, plows all the sidewalks for the town, John Van der Weyden. He's very conscientious. And I apologize if there was dirt came off the tracks and upset Ms. Pupo.
Thank you, Mr. Kaiser.
Hello. My name's Cheryl McDavid. I live at 40 Emmett Street, and I'm sorry I'm late, but I was listening to you online on YouTube on my way here. My concern as well, too, I'm not concerned about the 2 homes being put in, and from what I heard on my ride over here, that you're trying to make them fit in with the neighborhood, which was a concern of mine, so that's been answered. I've been on the street 20 years. When I moved onto the street, my sump pump was dry. I'm the lady that Mike mentioned, and actually my bill for having a triple safe system put in was $6,100 and another $330 in order to put a proper electrical outlet in for that. Over the years since the townhomes were built at the top of the street, my sump pump has gradually been going and going and going. And last April, I had a huge flood in the basement. I had neighbors coming over. They couldn't believe the amount of water that was coming in. And I'm just 2 doors down from 34 Emmett, where they were having the problem with the spring under the water, so, under the homes. When they were putting the sump system into my home, it was Omni Basement Systems, and it kept collapsing while they were digging because the water table is up so high now. I have come home during rainstorms, and the water has come halfway up my driveway. It's filled the ditches. Some at the corner of Station Street and Emmett Street, you can't even see where the ditch is. And I've actually called in and reported that to your emergency water service the last time that happened. I've reported it a couple of times. Before my basement flooded, I had the town come out to check to make sure I didn't have a leak in the water line on my property because of the saturation. And there was no leak, and the water was tested, and it had no chlorine in it. It was strictly groundwater. So my concern is putting the laterals in on Port Robinson, with Elizabeth Street being to the north of Emmett and Port Robinson to the south. When the water comes down down Elizabeth, it's not going to make its way all the way over to Port Robinson. It's going to come down our street first. And I'm a single parent I certainly didn't have the almost $7,000 to spend to ensure that my basement, doesn't get flooded again. And it's just a huge concern that if the drainage isn't corrected before more homes are built, that it's going to happen again. And my house isn't going to be sellable. Thank goodness the new system has 3 pumps in it, and it will go several times a minute. And I've got neighbors who can attest to that. And that's even with this system in. And I had to pay extra to have the drainage run further out all the way back to the drainage ditch in between Port Robinson Road and Emmett Street, because otherwise the amount of water that is pumping out of that sump, if I didn't direct it all the way to the back of the property, the sumps would be failing again. So again, I don't have a concern about putting some nice homes in there, and I'm sure you will because I've seen work that you have done. But I'm just concerned about the drainage on our street having to be put off until 2024. I had actually registered, I don't know if that's what you call it, to speak before 2013. And I was told that, are you sure you want to speak, because we're going to look after it this year. And I said, okay, fine, you're going to look after it. I'm not going to speak. But here it is 7 years later, and it hasn't been done.
Municipal government moves slowly.
Yeah,
And then
well,
hopefully,
that's money out of my pockets.
yes, I know.
That's money
And
I can't
and
afford.
these are decisions of council. I'm sure the engineering department is well aware of the problems. They have been trying to sell this project to members of council over a number of years. Hopefully, Mr. Marr and Mr. Young will be able to use your comments in their future presentations to council when it comes budget time. So hopefully the money will remain, and that's all I can tell you. I have no say in the matter, unfortunately. And this committee basically has no say in the matter. But I'm sure that the engineering department, planning department will have heard your comments, and hopefully they'll use them in their presentations to council so that this project can proceed. And that's about all. So thank you very much.
Yeah, no, as I mentioned, the concern I have is that water coming down Elizabeth Street, in order to get to your proposed area, it has to pass
Yep.
us, and that's an open street, and there is quite an angle. It's gonna come down our road.
Okay.
So,
Yes. Please come forward. We'd like to hear your comments on this.
Carol Jones, 44 Emmett Street.
Okay.
Could you please go over the condition that you just put in? I
Okay.
just want to be clear on that.
One of the conditions that's been put forth by our engineering department is that Mr. Kaiser will submit a comprehensive overall lot drainage plan for all parcels, and I'm adding the following, including existing side yards of abutting properties, demonstrating that the drainage neither relies upon nor negatively impacts neighboring properties to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. What this normally means in the terms of engineering and the design standards developed by the engineering department is that somehow Mr. Kaiser has to figure out a way to keep the stormwater that's generated on his property, and when it runs off his property, it does so in a manner that is not going to create additional flooding downstream. Am I correct in that, Mr. Young? Just so I don't make a mistake and give these people false hope.
So no water, rainwater, will be flowing from his house into the ditch, correct?
What will actually happen is his engineer will determine what is the quantity of water, the stormwater, that currently enters the ditches from his property now. Okay, but now hang on a second. From his property now, which is basically two lots that had one house. Now he's going to have two lots with two houses. The two houses will probably have a bigger hard surface area than the existing house. That would mean, in my simple arithmetic, says 1 inch of rain falling over a larger area is going to generate more runoff. So he will have to figure out a way to accommodate that additional runoff on his property and release it to the existing ditches in a slower manner. Okay?
Can you include the back ditch of his property too?
This is one of the reasons we said an overall lot drainage plan.
Okay.
Okay? And that's why I'm adding also the lot drainage to the abutting properties. Because what's happened in the past is that oftentimes stormwater generated on this property sneaks over to somebody else's property. And can at times cause a hardship on that abutting owner. So we need to get a bit of a handle on what's actually going on in the neighborhood, and Mr. Kaiser is going to give us a hand. Okay. Probably not willingly, but, whatever.
Mr. Chair, if I could. As the chair recognized and the committee recognized, there's currently two lots there. I could apply for a building permit on both lots tomorrow. With that building permit, I'd have to submit a grading plan. The grading plan would have to show that the grading doesn't impact any adjoining properties. The only outlet for drainage on those two lots is the ditch in the front. So let's be clear, that's where the water's got to go.
And we don't need any more water in that ditch. That's what we're trying to get at, sir.
But I think what's happening, and Mr. Young,
Just like Allen Street.
what's actually happening is that the town are recognizing the problem, and I guess improvements, according to the piece of correspondence that was handed to us tonight, there appears to be a move on by the Engineering and Public Works Department to try and move the water down the ditches a little faster, so it'll outlet into a revised ditch on Station Street,
Sir,
which
okay.
should help. And
But in 1985 to 1990, we were promised laterals put in. That long ago, it was pushed off, and it's pushed off. So excuse me for not believing anything. And
that's
and I
not
have
something
one more point.
that's something that's a decision. The timing basically
I'm sure
revolves
none
with
of these
council.
people
I'm sorry, but we can't. This is beyond our. This is a council decision dealing with a
But right now, we
project.
don't need any more water in the ditches until that's completed. Or we're going to have all these problems again.
Once again, we're dealing with a boundary adjustment to change, that basically changes the frontage of the two existing lots that are there.
So how do we go about having this postponed until the laterals are in? We don't?
Mrs. Weens, you're going to have to give me some help on this one.
Mr. Chair, through you, I don't have an answer with regards to postponement. As you've indicated, Mr. Kaiser could come in and apply for building permits on those two lots tomorrow. They comply, he just needs to come in and develop plans. The water was going in the ditch previously. The water will continue to go into the ditch. The drainage plan will manage the rate at which the water will flow in the ditch. And that's what is required. And that will, to a certain degree, improve the situation because what was there previously didn't have any controls or any management as to the rate at which water flowed into those ditches. So although this will not satisfy you, it will help the situation. And you've also heard that there is construction work that's going to happen this year that will also help the situation. And that work is approved and will be proceeding this year.
I don't know how to say through you to Miss Ween.
Just like that.
Just like that. And now I lost my train of thought. I'll get back to that. I have one more question. When this house was torn down, was it one lot or was it two lots?
It was two lots. The house was actually built on over two lots.
It's always been two lots. Then if you look at the aerial map of all the lots, why was it only just one lot?
Zoning bylaw shows it as one lot.
Yes, the zoning.
Okay, the zoning map doesn't necessarily. Okay, Ms. Weens, I understand that this was an original plan of subdivision, and this house was actually built on two lots in the original plan of subdivision. So maybe the previous owner bought two lots and decided to build a house on the two lots. I don't know.
Did they pay land taxes all those times for the extra lot?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I'll take your word for it, but, so there's still no way of going to the town. I get the wrong information all the time, so that we could temporarily stop this until our ditch flow has been resolved.
Mr. Young.
Okay, so let me run through how the process is supposed to work. Okay, so currently the storm sewer on Pelham Street is undersized. So all the catch basins that pick up the water from Elizabeth, Allen, all those areas, go to storm sewer that's undersized. So what the town did years ago was they put a culvert in to act as an overflow. So when they reach capacity, it overflows and directs it down Emmett Street. That's where all the flow is coming from. What we're going to do now is we're going to upsize the storm sewers to hold the water, remove the culvert that's discharging the water to Emmett Street and take it all to Port Robinson Road.
Underground
Underground.
to Port Robinson.
Port Robinson Road. Okay, so therefore that big culvert that's at the top of the ditch on Emmett Street should disappear. So therefore all the runoff that's coming from the west side will be directed to Port Robinson Road and not run down Emmett Street. So therefore the deluge that you guys get every time it rains should disappear.
And that will be done this year?
It's forecast to be done 2020. It's in no, we have funding for it because we actually got grant funding for it as well. So before we have to do it. It has to be done this year. I have a meeting set up for Thursday this week with the consultant who originally did the design back in 2013. As everybody knows, that's when the original design was done for Pelham Street. Okay, so and it was designed then to accommodate and remove that culvert. Since then, it's been deferred and put off and deferred and put off. So, but that's beyond my control because that could be done to, I could say the Treasury, but I'm not going to point a finger. So that's just the way it is. So this year, it is in the budget. The design is currently at 70% complete. We're going to get it updated to 90% and go out to tender on it. So that works are proposed to be done. Once that's done, we can then look at getting Emmett Street done because council deferred Station Street, which is also to be urbanized, to 2023. So you will have all the storm sewers put down on Station Street. You'll have all the sewers upsized on Pelham Street. So when we do Emmett Street, we know where we're going to go to.
I hope that helps.
Oh, it does.
I definitely understand what Mr. Young is saying. Basically,
Sorry. Go ahead, Don. Sorry. I apologize.
Ms. Pupo?
I just want to say one more thing because I was told by the mayor about this property that they had to take, he wanted to take, the reason that we were here tonight is that we're going to take 5 feet off the other property to create 2 separate properties that are of equal size. And that's not happening? Okay. That's what I was told.
Okay, so really what's
Through you,
happening?
Mr. Mayor, or through you, Mr. Chair,
Hang on a second.
the application is to take
5 feet.
part of one lot and add it to the other so that they are of equal
Width.
frontage. That's the purpose of this application.
Thank you.
Okay,
So I'm saying that they can't go, he can't get a building permit tomorrow until this is done.
well,
He-
yes, no.
Right now,
no.
he can get a building permit for each lot.
For each lot.
each lot, they are separate lots. This is just realigning the boundary between the 2 lots. It's essentially erasing one line and shifting it over.
Yeah. It's basically adjusting the boundaries of the existing lots, Carrie. Okay? So both, right now, he could build a 30-foot house, wide house on one lot and a house slightly wider on the other lot. He could do that, he could do that tomorrow. But what he'd like to do is probably have 2 houses, approximately the same square footage, probably the same kind of frontage, to blend in with the existing neighborhood. And that's really what this is all about. Now, Mr. Kaiser, any other comments?
Just one last comment. I got to meet some of my neighbors. That was nice. I deal with the town almost on a daily, weekly basis.
Wow, I don't know you.
And I wasn't aware that the problem was to that extent, but certainly I can advocate with you in that regard as I'm now a property owner on the same street and just as concerned that the problem be alleviated. So
Yeah, I have no problem with you building those houses there, Stephen. Not at all. I just don't want stuff.
The comments are to be made through the chair from the podium, please.
Sorry.
I just had one question I wanted to ask Mr. Kaiser. When the neighbor to the one side of Carrie passed away and the lot was subdivided there and a new house was built a few years back, just so you're aware, the builders had problems with that basement flooding while they were trying to sell it. So if this,
Let it again. to
yeah,
the
that's
homeowners.
what I'm saying. that-
Once again, comments are to be made through the chair from the podium.
So this is like a concern that you're going to have as well too, because while the home was trying to be sold, the basement continued to flood. And the new owners, Jacques and Steve, who live in there, they've had problems with the basement flooding. So I know you're going to be a little further up the street. It's not as bad, but be prepared when you're building for the same thing to happen to you.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee, any comments, concerns you wish to raise?
I have a concern of understanding. This town does not have a drainage bylaw. I have interpreted the comments that post-development stormwater discharge from the two lots is not to exceed pre-development stormwater discharge from the two lots. Is that factual?
Mr. Young.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Generally not in subdivision lots. These are two lots were created by part of a subdivision. If this was a parcel that was taken from maybe a site plan where it was a different, or it was previously a hard surface, or it was previously a greenfield, we would then put on the pre to post requirements on there. But as this would form part of a subdivision, and the stormwater management plans indicate that the runoff from these lots were accounted for in the ditches and down on Station Street, you can't do a pre to post with that effect.
Then, in my opinion, there's a misunderstanding. These people expect, based on the conversation, in my interpretation, that Mr. Kaiser will control the amount of stormwater discharge off these two lots not to exceed pre-development. In other words, today's amount of discharge. Am I correct?
Thank you.
That's what they understood based on this conversation. Mr. Kaiser will not be controlling the amount of stormwater discharge off these two lots. It is what it will be.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's the whole part of the subdivision agreement.
I understand that,
So
sir.
these lots are part of that subdivision agreement.
I understand that, sir,
so
but
these
there's no
lots-
pre and post.
No.
So I just want it clarified for these people that when two houses are built on these two lots, the amount of stormwater discharge will increase over what is there today and will not be controlled in any way, shape, or form by the developer.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it'll be controlled in accordance with the subdivision agreement. So in the subdivision agreement, we also have a grading plan that Mr. Kaiser will have to follow. So we have current grades for the existing lots surrounding that. We also know where the drainage goes on the existing lots surrounding that. Those requirements are still in place for these two lots.
That doesn't address the quantity of stormwater. It just says whatever water is there will be handled.
When this was done, yes.
All right. Do I understand, and I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, it's off topic, but we've been off topic for 20 minutes or half an hour. This situation is caused by the fact that all the stormwater for Elizabeth, the townhouse development, comes down this street?
Yes, thank you.
Has somebody lost their mind?
Yep. They pressured Elizabeth.
Never mind.
Whoa. Hey, wait,
All right, Mr. Chairman,
hang on a second. Mr. Law. has a
Yes,
chance before
through you, the
before
chair.
go somewhere.
We had this discussion on 20 Allen Crescent. We know the water goes downhill. We know that the water from the new development where our old school used to be winds up down College Street and winds up down Emmett. We know that. We personally went and we looked at the drainage on Emmett Avenue and we saw the ditches and we saw how half of them are caved in and some of them don't flow worth a darn. And we know how dangerous water is. However, that's not really our job as the Committee of Adjustments. And with all respect to Mr. Kaiser, who's trying to do a really good job for the town, infilling this property with proper housing and so forth. I guess my question is, do we have a ditch at the back, like at the back of the property going down to Port Robinson Road or Station Street?
There is drainage.
Is there a swale back at the back of the lot?
Please, if you're going to make a comment, please.
My question
Please
is to
come to the
Mr.
podium.
Kaiser.
I'd like to defer to Mr. Young, but essentially we've knocked down the house and we realize that we'll have to come up with a drainage plan for both building permits and for the property in its entirety now as a condition of this. I just refer back. We're just moving a lot line here 5
Okay.
feet. That's
I
all we're
understand.
talking about. If it becomes too complicated for this committee, I'll just pull at the cost of a couple $1,000s and whatever, pull the application and just move forward and build the 2 damn houses. And there won't be a house as nice as looking on one lot as the other lot. So that's my position.
Okay, I think the reason I asked that question, Mr. Kaiser, in fairness to your neighbors and fairness to yourself as a developer, because we totally agree with what you're doing. You didn't bring the water to our streets, and we know that. We're trying to figure how are we going to deal with the water. The town is going to stop all the water coming down Allen Crescent and Elizabeth Drive, and it's going to zip it over to Port Robinson Road. So basically, so I understand, the ditches aren't going to be as full as they are now when that new ditch is going to be put over to Port Robinson Road. Am I correct in saying that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, when all the storm sewer gets upgraded this year, then yes, the majority of the storm will go to Port Robinson
This year?
this year.
Okay. These homes will be built, Mr. Kaiser, this year?
Through the chair to you, I'm not sure when they'll be built, or I'm not sure exactly if I'll be building them, but I don't think that's part of the discussion today.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty happy to know that the town has made plans to divert the water from Elizabeth Drive and Allen Crescent over to Port Robinson Road, which is going to alleviate a large portion of the gallonage that's going down your street now. If that is true and that happens, then I'm quite happy to proceed with this application.
Have any other comments? Please state your name and your address.
Chair, it's Jackie Lawton, and I live directly behind the upper of the 2 lots at 28 College Street. Just in answer to your earlier question, no, there is no ditch between the properties. There's still some of the French tiling from when that was originally Fonthill Nurseries. The backyard behind us is underwater some of the time in the spring and in the fall. So yeah, that's probably going to be worse. And I'm sure your grading has to take that into consideration. And then if this other work gets done, that water will go. But there isn't anything there at all right now. So it is a concern for those of us on College Street too. Because right now the water, I guess if this construction thing is starting from College Street, does that mean there still is water coming down? Because I'm not sure where the water is coming down on our driveway, but it comes all the way down, round the fire hydrant that they paved around, and down our driveway, and we've had to put in all kinds of extra drainage to take it around behind our garage. And I pay a neighbor to shovel up the detritus that's washed down into our driveway as well. I don't think that has anything to do with this boundary line, and my first reaction when Nancy Bizzato explained it to me was this was a logical thing to do, to split so that you have 2 even lots. I just hope you're not building McMansions.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lawton. I think we've had enough. We understand the drainage problem. We understand now probably how it's been created. We also understand how it's going to be solved. It's going to take time, but it appears based on what Mr. Young has stated, that the town is at least proceeding to try and solve part of the problem. And with that being said, are there any other comments from members of the committee, or can we? Nancy.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just want to reassure the neighbors that all of the comments have been recorded in the minutes for this meeting. They have been heard by the Public Works Department, and all of the Committee of Adjustment minutes do go to the council as part of an agenda once they are approved. The focus of this application is that today we have 2 lots with different frontages. Tomorrow we will have 2 lots. Whether this is approved or not approved, the only difference is the frontages. So all of the comments have been recorded, all of the concerns have been taken into consideration.
Mr. Kaiser.
Just one last comment, and I reiterate what Ms. Bizzato said. We're only discussing this application is to move the line 5 feet. That's all it's about.
That's right.
It's not about water coming down the road, even though there was lots of discussion about that, and I understand the concern. It's about moving the line 5 feet. Either there's jurisdiction to do it or there's not, and that's the committee's decision. Thank you.
This committee is going to make a decision on the granting of the consent. And with that, can I have a mover, please, and a seconder?
Through you, the chair, I recommend that this application be approved for the 5 feet that Mr. Kaiser has asked for.
Okay, so you're not saying, you're suggesting that the application B3 2020P 31 Emmett Street, application for consent to convey Part 3 to added Part 2, and the sketch is hereby granted. Is that your motion?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, sir.
And the above decision is subject to the following conditions, or you're going to?
Well, I think Mrs. Bizzato laid out that very clearly, that in the future, very short near future, through Mr. Young and Mr. Thompson and whomever else is involved with the new ditch water movement process at the top of Emmett happens to the satisfaction of these folks here tonight.
The motion would be to include the conditions as outlined in the planning report.
Yes.
There was a request by the chair to include side yards of adjoining properties in the lot grading and drainage considerations.
Yes.
So if the motion is to approve, including those conditions as outlined in the planning report.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Bizzato. Thank you.
Okay, here we go. The above decision is subject to the following conditions. To the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works, submit an overall lot drainage and grading plan, which includes the abutting property owners. Ensure a new lot is serviced individually with sanitary, sewers, and water services. Submit a drawing illustrating the locations of the services. Obtain driveway permits if necessary for both lots, if the existing driveway and one of the lots is being changed. To the satisfaction of the Director of Community and Planning and Development, sign the town's memorandum of understanding. To the Secretary Treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment, that Part 3 is to merge with Part 2. A, with the solicitor's written undertaking is required for that. Secondly, the Secretary Treasurer be provided with a registratable legal description of the properties. A copy of the deposit reference plan also be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. That a final certification fee of $395 be provided to the Secretary Treasurer. And that this decision is based on the following reasons. The application conforms to policies of the Town of Pelham official plan, the regional policy plan, provincial policy statements, and definitely complies with the town zoning bylaw. The decision is rendered having regard for the provisions of sections 5124 and 5125 of the Planning Act as amended. Thirdly, the Committee of Adjustment has considered all written and oral submissions, which there have been many concerning drainage, and finds that subject to the conditions of the provisional consent, this application meets the Planning Act criteria, is consistent with the provisional policy statement, and complies with the growth plan of the Niagara region and the town of Pelham. With that, let's vote on, can we have a vote on this? All in favor?
You're going to need a seconder
Oh,
first.
we need a seconder first.
For my
Mr.
motion.
Sheldon seconds it because the chairman can't. Anyway, all in favor? Carried. And with that, thank you very much. I hope this has been somewhat of a education in municipal work. We have another couple of things we have to look after, committee. One of which is the approval of the minutes of the November 5th meeting, at which Mr. Cook, Mr. Law, and Mr. Sheldon were the members. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes as prepared? Moved by Mr. Law, seconded by, all in favor? Carried. Can I have a motion to adjourn the Committee of Adjustment of the Town of Pelham?
I move to adjourn the meeting, sir.
Seconded, Mr. Sheldon. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, people.